So for the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to hand over to Mr. President to give brief remarks, and then after that, we're going to open the floor for you to ask a few questions. And as usual, I would request you to be succinct because time has run out, and I know you are racing against time as well. Headlines need to be made, and therefore keep your questions short. State your name and the name of your organization. And remember, for interpretation, you've got these gadgets. I hope all of you now have got these gadgets. You can choose Channel 2 for English, and I think Channel 1 or 3 is for French. So may I ask, please do sit down so that I hand over to Mr. President to make his brief remarks. Please do sit down. Okay, thank you so much. Mr. President, may I hand over to you? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Let me thank you all for staying to the end of the annual meetings. We just had the closing ceremony for the annual meetings now. And I just want to let you know that these annual meetings have been an incredible success for us. I start by thanking the government of the Arab Republic of Egypt for putting up what is an incredible annual meetings and a great show. And I think they took care of us, they took care of everybody, and they took care of the journalists. You journalists, also media people, had a good place. The facilities were excellent, and I just want to thank the government and the people of Arab Republic of Egypt for their remarkable support. When you all came here, you came here because you wanted to hear about what is going on with climate change. And in the opening sessions and the press that I addressed at that time, I told you the losses that Africa is suffering from on climate change, and that Africa will need $2.7 trillion by 2030 to be able to deal with all of its climate finance, to tackle both the mitigation and also tackle the issue of adaptation on climate change. And please, let's welcome the governor of the central bank and the Mr. Governor, I was just thanking the government and the people of Arab Republic of Egypt for your tremendous support since he's here, so you can give it up to him and thank him for his great support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to say that the conversations, as you saw it, went on in various sessions, knowledge events. We launched the African Economic Outlook for this year. It was a great success to look at the performance of African economists, and I hope you all participated in those sessions, and I welcome any comments that you may have or any questions in that regard. We just finished the final meeting of the Board of Governors, and what are some of the things that are takeaways for us before I open it up for questions from you. First is that our Board of Governors actually congratulated the African Development Bank for being named by Public Watch to Fund as the most transparent development finance institution in the world for our sovereign operation. And second, that the Board of Governors of the bank also congratulated the bank that the African Development Fund, which is the concessional financing vehicle of the bank, was also rated by the Global Center on Development for Development in Washington as the second best concessional financing institution in the world. And these are all globally respected ratings that we continue to get. And of course, they also congratulated us because the African Development Bank was also ranked by Global Finance last year as the best multilateral financial institution in the world. So what all that means is our governors were appreciating the bank for not just being an African development bank, but the bank for being a globally relevant and a leader when it comes to development globally. And when it comes to that, nothing in context of what we are talking about can be more important than leadership with climate change. Now, we take climate change very, very, very seriously as an organization. Our Board of Governors congratulated and commended us that we exceeded all the targets that we set when it comes to climate change. We set a target that we will provide 40% of our financing for climate, and now we provide 45% of our financing for climate. Our governors congratulated us on what we were doing with regard to climate adaptation, which is Africa's main issue. We are today at 67% of our climate finance going into climate adaptation, which far exceeds the 50% balance that the world was asked to do. Again, we are far ahead. And for me, as president of the bank, I feel so proud about that because we have no choice. Because a lot of promises were made for Africa, a lot, and for the developing world. Those promises were made right here again during COP27 that we were all here, to have $100 billion of financing for climate by developed countries for developing countries. We also had promises that were made in terms of loss and damage. But guess what? The loss and damage continues. But the resources are only trickling in. From Kenya to Mozambique, to Madagascar, to Rwanda, to Malawi, when it rains, it pours. Africa continues to suffer tremendously from climate change. And I want to say that infrastructure is Africa's major challenge. But even the resources that we continue to put into infrastructure are being damaged by climate change. They have to be rebuilt. Not to talk of the amount of lives that we lose to people. The Board of Governors of the bank congratulated the bank for its innovation in insuring countries against extreme weather events. We have a facility that is called the Africa Disaster Risk Insurance Facility, which insures countries against catastrophic risk events. That facility needs to be scaled up. We discussed with our Board of Governors about the need to have a new way of measuring wealth that takes into consideration biodiversity, natural capital, and the forest ecosystems that Africa has in abundance. And you've heard me say this before. I don't believe that we can go from billions of dollars to trillions of dollars for climate unless and until we change how we measure wealth. GDP as a measure of wealth is the biggest challenge for us on climate and green growth because it does not take into consideration how that wealth is created. It does not internalize the externalities of that growth process. And it does not reward those that are actually contributing both regional and global public goods, which Africa is contributing significantly. The whole of the carbon sequestration in the world, the lungs to do that, it's largely going to be lungs that are in Africa, and they are in the Congo Basin. That's a vast, is the largest in the world. But what do we get for it? So we agree that it's important to price carbon properly. It's important to take the natural capital stock and the whole issue of carbon sequestration, forest cover, biodiversity preservation into account in measuring our wealth. And if we do that, Africa, those countries that are actually doing all those greening will be much richer than they are currently today. And that's a fundamental thing that we must have. We contribute global public good, but we want to make sure that what we're contributing is actually well accounted for in how our wealth is measured. The boards of governors of the African Development Bank ask us to continue to work more on renewable energy. And of course, we are doing that. Today, 87% of all our work in terms of energy generation is from renewables. We had conversations, pretty forthright conversations, with our Board of Governors about the reality of making sure that 600 million Africans can have access to energy. And I was pretty clear, we were very clear, that, you see, it is not ideology that powers economies, it's pragmatism. The fact of the matter is, today we are the leader when it comes to that. From Nouadhizate in Morocco, which is the world's largest solar power plant, was invested in by the African Development Bank. The Medelt, which is also in Morocco, was invested in by the African Development Bank. And Morocco, in fact, is one of the leaders globally when it comes to that. And all our work in Africa to do the desert to power, which will produce 10,000 megawatts of electricity, is being led by their brother from Morocco, the Bakri, who is the chair of the MASEN, which is the Morocco Energy Agency. So Morocco has a lot to share with the rest of the world. But what I want to say here is even right here in Egypt, the Bemban project, which His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is doing here, more than 3,000 megawatts of power. The African Development Bank invested in that. We will continue to invest and unlock Africa's renewable energy capacity. We will, to the maximum. However, there are limits. Africa needs to have access to electricity. It needs to have affordability of electricity, and it needs to have security of electricity so that we can power our industries and create jobs for ourselves. And therefore, we had a conversation that what we got to do is natural gas has a role to play in this process. Gas to power, gas for liquefied petroleum gas, for women that are cooking. And also, in fact, gas, natural gas, for fertilizers, so we can actually fertilize our crops and feed ourselves. That's two words that are very critical. I want to make sure that we all understand. Low carbon, climate resilience. Low carbon. Remember, that did not say no carbon. So everything that you're doing that is contributing to reducing the carbon, reducing emissions, because you have to go from where you are to where you need to be. We are strongly committed to transitioning in Africa, but we need a just and fair transition, energy transition for Africa. Our Board of Governors also asked us, beyond climate, to continue to work on infrastructure, which is one of the biggest things that we do as a bank. And they ask us to continue to invest in project preparation so we can have good project preparation facilities, like the NEPAD infrastructure project preparation facility, so that we can prepare bankable projects that can support a lot of work on infrastructure. They encouraged us as well in terms of the issue of debt, because I was saying that if you have climate change that is decimating Africa, taking away about 15% of Africa's GDP, guess what? That's money we could have used without having to borrow money. And so climate change contributes to indebtedness in Africa. So therefore, we have to continue to work on debt issues. And in working on debt issues, let's make sure that debt is made to work for Africa in a way that is just and fair, and in a way that does not lengthen how long it takes to have debt resolution for African countries. We were asked to do more. We were commended and asked to do more on food security. Of course, the biggest challenge for food security is, again, climate change. That's because 3% of Africa's land is irrigated. The rest of it is rain-fed agriculture. So when it doesn't rain, that's it. In fact, I always say that perhaps the way in which we get agriculture working in Africa is praying. We pray a lot. I love praying. Everybody here loves praying too. But in Europe, in America, in the advanced countries, farmers have insurance against hail, against flood, disasters. They call them disaster payments. Our farmers have nothing. And therefore, we must climate-proof agriculture and provide quality, climate-resilient agricultural technologies for our farmers. We must scale up access to crop insurance, livestock insurance for our pastoralists. It shouldn't be because it didn't rain, then the livelihoods of families fall apart. And so we've been asked to do a lot more in this area, and we certainly will. The issue of water security, we were asked to do more when it comes to the issue of water security. And here, Governor, I want to commend the government of Egypt for its outstanding work in this area of water management and what you have done or you are doing with the Nexus, with your program called NEFWI, which is Nexus of Water, Energy, and Food. And that interconnectedness is very, very important. Water is life. And in a situation where we don't have enough water, we're going to have a lot of challenges. So the African Development Bank will do a lot more in terms of water, how we harvest water, how we store water, how we manage water basins, and also transboundary water resources on the continent. I'm glad to let you know that in the broad picture of things, our board of governors were also talking about pandemics and how we prepare for the pandemics of the future. And we were asked to do more, especially on pharmaceuticals, and I take questions on that. But we were also told to get the Africa Pharmaceutical Technology Foundation, which is a foundation we have set up to make it easier for African countries to have access to proprietary technology for making pharmaceutical drugs and vaccines. We were tasked by the Board of Governors to put that into operation very, very fast. You never know when the next pandemic will hit. We were commended about women. I am a very, very pro-women president. In fact, I have in my vice presidents, we have 4 of them. One of them, maybe one is here. The others, we have 4 vice presidents that are women. The men keep telling me, Mr. President, are you sure it's not going to be 80 or 80-20? We as a bank today, we have 100% of all our operations gender marked. You got to tell us what you are doing for women or your project can never pass our board. 100%. My director general, some of them are here. 60% of our director generals in the bank are women. And every time I want to make an appointment, the men are constantly looking, what's he going to do next? And they're very, very competent. They're very accomplished. They're very brilliant. They do an incredible job. And that, by the way, has never happened in the history of this bank. I thought the women would clap for that. It's not a gesture. It's a recognition of diversity and the fact that we have brilliant people, brilliant women among us that we must always promote. And so we were commended for what we were doing in terms of providing finance for women. Because last year we provided $1.1 billion of finance to women businesses in Africa. So we are well on our way of being able to do $5 billion for women in Africa. A big issue that came out of our meetings was about the global financial architecture and what that means for us as African Development Bank. And I just want to say 3 things about that. First is that we as a bank, the things that people are asking others to do, we've been doing even before we were asked to do them. We were commended by the Board of Governors for our global leadership, and I emphasize global leadership, on financial innovations of securitization, mobilizing private capital, transferring assets of our books to the private sector. We are the leader in the world on this issue, and we were commended, and we are asked to do quite a lot more. And some of you were there at the Room to Run that was done event just a few days ago. The issue of special drawing rights occupied our governors, and again, the bank was commended for its global leadership on development of financial solutions to be able to make it possible for special drawing rights to be rechanneled to multilateral development banks like ourselves. And that's, again, one of the things. And when it comes to global leadership, these are the areas in which the bank is being commended on for all of its work. Two more points, and I'll open it up, is with regard to investments. Africa needs private sector investments. But we are committed to removing all those biases of people thinking Africa is just a very risky place, because it's not. When you look at what the Moody's Analytics have done in terms of cumulative losses, I was on a CNN program with Richard Quest, and Richard asked me the question and said, well, Mr. President, his understanding was that, we don't need that much money, but this and that. And I said, no, we actually do need $2.7 trillion by 2030. But the question we were discussing in that interview was a very interesting interview, was about private sector. But how do we get the private sector money? We have to develop bankable projects. We have to de-risk the projects. We have to have good business investment regulatory environments. We have to have counterparties that we can work with. You have to develop capital markets so that when they invest, they can exit. So those are the things that we need to continue to do to be able to leverage, and we will do that as a bank. But the Africa Investment Forum was particularly commended by the Board of Governors, and they asked us to do more in using it to raise several more billions of dollars for Africa. And finally, is when it comes to green infrastructure. The governors commended the bank on the launch of the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa. It's a new vehicle that we have put out to mobilize $10 billion for green infrastructure in Africa and to move Africa towards net zero. And finally, for me, as president of the bank, I couldn't be happier than today. For the 37 countries that are the low-income countries of Africa, they are the ones that face the problems of climate change the most, and they are the ones that have the least resources to adapt to it. And they don't have enough resources. And so the governors of the bank were very supportive of the bank's African Development Fund, using its equity to be able to go to the capital markets and raise money. There's still a bit of work to do to sign things between countries and all of that, but that itself is a milestone. So what that means is that every cycle of replenishment, which is every 3 years, we can, when this is launched, raise additional $4 billion per cycle for this least developed low-income countries. It could grow up to $27 billion or even more, depending on what the interest rates are when these are launched. So really, I feel particularly satisfied that this was the key, because 9 out of the 10 most vulnerable countries to climate change in the world, 9 out of the 10 of them are all countries that rely on the African Development Fund. And so when we have these new resources, it allows them to be able to respond. And in addition to that, we have the climate action window of the African Development Fund that will provide an additional $429 million for these countries. And we were asked by our Board of Governors to push harder so that we can reach $14 or so billion for that. So all in all, That's what happened in between meetings, decisions made, just to give you a summary of it. But before I take questions from you, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank you for the stories that you write. I want to thank you for the participation. It's beyond just the stories that you write. It's the interest that you have and the interest that you should have for our continent and the issues that matter so desperately for our continent. So I see the media as partners for us on a journey of hope for our continent. And I will ask that you continue to carry stories about the developments on our continent. I will not deny that we have challenges, no. But we have so many great things happening. So write those stories about the great things happening, even as we accept the challenges we still have to face and to deal with. So your role is very, very crucial. And so I always appreciate time with media because I know that you ask issues that are of interest to the public. And we had one of the things that was wonderful in this session before I close was Zimbabwe. We had a very fantastic session on Zimbabwe where President Mnangagwa was there, President Chisano, former president of Mozambique, was there, I was there, and several partners from around the world, they were there. It was incredible. And you got a sense of collective action to put our hands around Zimbabwe. There's still a lot of work to be done. A lot. Economic, governance, land issues. But there is an agreement that we should work together and get solutions to help Zimbabwe out of the sanctions situation. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, and I will take your questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. President, for that. Members of the press, we've got two microphones, roving microphones, one at the back there with Chief Emeka, and Shauki is here in a suit. So please, it seems this side is more active. We'll start right from at the back, the lady at the back with the gentleman as we come this way. Please do say your name and organization. Be brief, please. Thank you.
Lamia Mwafi from Egyptian TV. I would like to ask you about the cooperation between the bank and Egypt. You say that there is a cooperation that President Sisi supports the solar and power energy in the largest solar energy in Aswan, Benban. And he also said there is a good program of Novi, where is water and energy and food program. Will you shed a light how these programs can help Africa, can be good models for Africa, and how the African countries can cooperate together to overcome climate changes? And thank you a lot.
Okay, pass the microphone to CNBC.
Thank you so much. My name is Kenneth Igbomo from CNBC Africa. All right. My name is Kenneth Igbomo from CNBC Africa. My question is addressed in two areas. One, listening to all what you've said and the feedback from the Board of Governors, the issue of speed comes to question. How fast can we then ramp up these resources that need to be mobilized? And the second question also correlates, links to it as well. Are you exploring other areas like sovereign wealth funds as well as the diaspora community? Thank you.
Pass to the lady in front, and then we'll take those. We'll take 4 questions. The one behind. Yes, that one exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Lucy Ogalwi from News Agency of Nigeria. Please, what has been the challenges of the bank in the past year? Thank you.
Thank you for that. One more question. We'll take one more, and then I'll cross to that side later on. But let's take one more from here. The gentleman in white.
My name is George Rido from Tone Communications, Kenya. Yesterday, the U.S. government had an agreement with the Kenyan government that whatever money they give to Kenya for development and is messed up with officials, then the official must be sanctioned. Yesterday, the U.S. government had an agreement with the Kenyan government that when they give Kenyan money for development and officials have some funny deals with it, they must be sanctioned for it. From Well, borrowing a leaf from that, do you, as FDB, have a way to make sure that every single dollar that you provide for African programs is utilized to the letter?
Thank you. We'll take those 4 questions first, then I'll come to the other side. Thank you, Mr. President.
I would like the governor to take the first one, which is on the nexus for water, food, and energy, and what that can do to help others, and what other lessons we can learn from Egypt. So, since he is the governor of the bank and he is representing Egypt, I'll let my chairman take that question.
Thank you, Mr. President. NOAFI is a platform, it's Nexus for Water, Food and Energy, and it is done through a Ministry of International Cooperation to bring all stakeholders. It's a model whereby it's easy to have all the stakeholders in one place so that these projects can come to life. And we believe that there are around, on this platform, there are around projects for around 1.4 to 1.5 billion, and they are now coordinating between stakeholders for them to go out. It's there for financing, for the financiers to know the projects, and for them all to be together. And the second part of your question, yes, we have been working very closely, and we're honored to be working with the African Development Bank. We have a lot of projects in Egypt. We have things relating to food security, electricity and green growth, water recycling and agriculture. There are various projects that we are working, and I believe Dr. Adesina has mentioned also the BIMBAN, where it's a model where we can work, but of course the details of the model need some sophistication because it's very financial, it's relatively financially complicated, but it's there if you need any more details. Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, just to what the governor has said, we do policy-based operations as a bank, where we lend monies to countries for reforms. And I can tell you, the best policy-based operation that we've ever done as a bank was on Egypt, which was on the energy sector reforms of Egypt. That, for our board of directors, is the example of how effective policy-based operations should be done. And since we gave that to Egypt, Egypt has done a lot in the reforms of its energy sector. Tariffs, functioning of utilities, investing more on renewable energy, and driving down the costs so that you can have accessibility at scale. And that's what happened. So when you talk about what the rest of the world can learn, I think good governance, developing great projects, moving at speed, and doing them at scale, all of which I find in Egypt. Now, the other thing, just to support what my governor has said, is the way in which you do water here. As the governor mentioned, the whole issue of your water management and wastewater treatment is probably one of the best in the world. Because if you look at the Gabal El Asfar, there's also another one, Abu Rawash, and all of those. These are big, big stuff in which millions and millions of people are using treated water. And so I was talking to some countries just a few days ago who actually mentioned to me that I actually told them they should go to Egypt and learn from them how to do water treatment and all that. And that conversation happened between Egypt and those countries at this particular meeting. Of course, the other area that I see Egypt can really share with the rest of Africa is on pharmaceuticals. Because as we try to deal with that, it's a lot that we can do and learn from Egypt on pharmaceuticals, and of course the speed at which the solar projects are done here is just mind-boggling. Because in 2014, this country has 6,000 megawatts of electricity deficit. In 2022, it has 20,000 megawatts of surplus. 8 years. Just tells you about what focused leadership, determination is. So when you ask me about what, if you can learn, I've always said this about President El-Sisi. I said it during the opening ceremony. I like him because he does things at scale. He does them very fast. And that's what we need. You know, I've said I'm not going to be around in 2063. I'll be long gone by then. But everything in the future for Africa should not be in the future. It should be made faster. And when I come to Egypt and I see things happening at scale like this and fast, I'm enormously encouraged. And so you have a lot to share. Yes, it is. It is certainly lots to learn from here. Now, on the CNBC, your issue on the speed of action, one of the areas in which we're going to have to move even much faster is how to mobilize more resources for the private sector. And we already have ways we are going to do that. So at the Africa Investment Forum, which we held in November, and of course, let me thank CNBC Africa for being always the media that covers that for us. We will have a lot of focus on the private sector, mobilizing more private sector to go into green growth, green industries, green metal industries. And so that is an area that you will see speedy action. The other area of speedy action is on the issue of special drawing rights. So we need to have this year be 5 countries committed that will do rechanneling of SDRs to the African Development Bank. And the other area where you see speedy action from us is on the Youth Entrepreneurship Investment Banks. We expect to go to our board of directors very soon with a few this year, and then we do more for next year. So these are some of the areas that I see. And you mentioned diaspora. We as a bank, the chief economists of the bank, organized a fantastic event. When was that? It was like this, last year? Yeah. Where we brought in the diaspora globally. Diaspora is critical for Africa. It's not a brain loss, it's a brain recirculation. It comes back. Circular economy, they call it these days. So it's the same. Brains of Africa, working from Africa, from anywhere in the world, you know. And so diaspora is more than just remittances. It's knowledge, it's skills, it's experience, it's investment, it's networks, and the credibility they bring to our continent, and the pride they bring to us. So we will continue as a bank to work with them on the issue of diaspora bonds in particular, so they can issue diaspora bonds. Egypt used diaspora bonds. Ethiopia also has diaspora bonds. Many countries have that. We'll continue to do that. And sovereign wealth funds and pension funds. We have, I think, roughly $3 trillion of assets under management, pension fund and sovereign wealth funds. But my view is this. If you're taking your $3 trillion and you're investing in money market instruments with negative real rate of return, and you're supposed to be a pension fund in Africa, so when people retire, they're supposed to get annuities, payments for the rest of their lives. But when they come back, there's no water, there's no road, there's no hospital, there's no electricity. And your pension fund is supposed to help you to have a good retirement. You're going to have a lousy retirement. And so it is time for us to work very actively with pension funds and sovereign wealth funds to invest in infrastructure as an asset class so that we are actually using our money to work for us. And Lucy's point on challenges the bank has faced last year, all the challenges we didn't cause. Climate change has been a devastating one for many of the countries. The whole issue that you have in terms of the increase in debt service costs for many of the countries as developed economies continue their tightening of monetary policy, driving up interest rates. The central bank governor is here, and he can speak to that issue more eloquently than I can. But also you have the other challenges that we are having from geopolitical tensions around the world that increases uncertainties and affects us in terms of food security and also heightens the thing. But I don't know whether the governor wants to say a few things about the global environment and how you see that central bank governor in affecting Africa.
Well, really, Africa was caught in a very hard place with these developments internationally. We all know about the increase and the geopolitical tensions, all this stuff. But what's more important is that the world does not realize that Africa cannot, the increase in the rates of the debt and the inability of African institutions to have a window for refinance is quite, let's put it this way, not only unfair, cruel, and unjustified. Most countries in Africa have international debt that suddenly, after servicing it for relatively low interest rates, became higher. That's one. Then they were faced with higher costs that increased their need for financing, and at the same time, the risk premiums inflicted on the African economies have been skyrocketing, really, beyond reason. And of course, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the more these risk premiums are going to international funds and to international investors who are now demanding a much higher premiums for making this country being able to sustain just the level of debt they are in. And just for you to know, I don't know of a country, including the United States of America, that if the refinancing window closed, it will not fail, including the United States of America. Okay, so these issues, I mean, we in Africa, really need to work together in order to have our own funds circulate within us, and to make sure that the perception of our economies is closer to the reality, rather than being framed on an aberration and a specific moment that where a lot of negative factors have come in place. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, I just want to add to what the governor said, because the governor feels the impact. He's central bank governor. He has to manage the whole of the economy of Egypt, one of the largest economies on the continent. But just on your last point that the governor said, that's why the African Development Bank, for exactly the reasons the governor said, is developing what's called the Africa Financial Stability Mechanism, which is to provide those liquidity buffers to Africa, right? So that as we face these exogenous shocks, we have some cushions for ourselves, and that's very important. We are the only region in the world that does not have liquidity buffers, the only one. And so therefore, that's not acceptable, and we are going to change that. And the other one is what the governor said about rating. I was amazed. Some data was shared with me just yesterday that for the same rating of African countries with countries from other parts of the world, Latin America, Asia, exactly the same rating by the same rating agency, the African country will pay 200 basis points, 500 basis points, 900 basis points above those for the same rating. So what is it? So African risks are not being priced properly, and we are paying too much. And the amount of money that we can save in terms of, I understand we probably can save about $74.5 billion if things were actually priced properly for us. And so that's why in the African Economic Outlook report that was launched by Professor Rama and their team, chief economist, one of the areas that they say they support, and it's what the AU is supporting, which is the idea of having an African rating agency. If you have the right data, you know what the risk elements are, you're closer, you can assess political, financial, economic risks, geopolitical risks easily on the continent. At least you have something to measure, because right now it's not fair the way Africa is being rated. So those are, when you say, what are the things, you can see these are all things that are exogenous to us, but that we have to deal with. And on Kenya, yes, on corruption, government monies don't belong in private pockets, right? So there has to be zero tolerance for corruption. We as a bank have a zero tolerance for corruption in any of our projects. We also have to have full transparency in financial accounting on projects. And that's why also for us, we are very big on this particular issue. I think that if Africa just dealt with some of this corruption on illicit capital flows, we will have a lot more money. And we lose today about $83 billion every year from illicit capital flows. And so government money should stay government money, not in private pockets. And I think those that actually are corrupt and steal government money should face the full consequence of the law.
Good, thank you so much. We'll now move to this other side and take some questions. We'll start with the lady right here in front, and then we'll move across there.
Hi everyone, my name is Ristel Chounan. I am Deputy Editor-in-Chief at La Tribune Afrique, and I would like to ask my question in French, but Mr. President, you can answer in English.
Throughout these meetings, on several occasions, you raised the issue of reappraising the wealth of African countries, and you said a while ago that we cannot only rely on GDP and that in the current context we should also bear in mind the wealth generated by the continent to fight climate change, including the Congo Basin, among others. And my question is the following, and I think it is a relevant question because since last year, the whole world was in Africa, in Kinshasa, to discuss how the continent can avail the Congo Basin to the world. So tell me, in concrete terms, how do we take this advocacy forward to ensure that it is considered by the international community such that the wealth of African countries is properly assessed? What is the responsibility of governments in this matter, and how does the bank, African Development Bank, intend to support that advocacy so that it is properly heard?
Let me answer that question.
All right.
Yeah. The issue there is, I remember reading a book many years ago by a Peruvian economist called Hernandez de Soto. And that book was about the mystery of capital. And it talked about the fact that the poor may be poor, but in fact they have so much assets, and what they have is just not valued. And that in fact, if we put value on the assets that the poor have, they will not be as poor as we see it. So it is possible to have assets that is either not valued or it is undervalued. So as a result, you actually suddenly look so poor. So what we are talking about here is that the time is right, just like we're talking about pricing risk of Africa properly. Let's price the natural capital of Africa properly. When the world says we should talk about biodiversity, yes, we were even asked by our governors to include biodiversity a lot in our work. But when we say biodiversity, the valuation of that biodiversity, it's very important. When we talk about forests, forest cover, carbon sequestration, the lungs of the world that we provide, but we are not, it's not being valued for us. So we're just doing it for everybody else. And why is it that because we are the ones that have the opportunity to sequester carbon, why is the price of carbon in Africa so low that we are not properly compensated for the carbon sequestration? So just like it is in the just energy transition, we need just valuation methodologies for our wealth. And I have tasked the chief economist of the bank, and it's right in front of you, Professor Rama, to come up with methodologies that allow us to have a just and fair valuation of the wealth of African countries based on natural capital stock, based on carbon sequestration, based on biodiversity. And then, of course, our voice must be heard. Because if our voice is not heard, the global environment will not change how our wealth is measured. And so at every function, at every event, we provide, it's not that, I don't like ideological discussions. I like pragmatic discussions based on facts. Put it out, this is how we should have looked like. This is how we look like today. We have to change the methodology in which our wealth is being assessed. So there will be quite a lot of work to work with countries on natural resource accounting in their own accounting. And there's a lot of work there on data, on methodologies that you have, the consistency of how you do it across. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but it's something that we owe Africa to do. It can't be that every time Africa has a resource, suddenly it is priced wrongly. And so that's on that. So knowledge products we are going to use to be able to do that.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I go to the next question, just to say our Chief Economist and Vice President for Economic Governance and Knowledge Management, I know you may want to see him following Mr. President's comments. You may just show yourself up to the journalist, Professor. That's the, okay. So now let's go to questions in the middle row. Right at the back, please. Let's start at the back as we come forward. Yes, please.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I'm from the Algerian Press Service. So, my question would be in French. So, in the course of, Mr. President, is that okay now? So, over the last 5 days, the Board of Governors considered a reform of the global financial architecture for greater involvement of the IMF through the special drawing rights and other donors to ensure sustainable development in Africa. Now, we have the annual meetings of the African Development Bank that has just come to an end. And in terms of advocacy, what are the concrete actions you intend to implement to crystallize that move, considering that developing countries have not met, or developed countries have failed to meet their promises to Africa on several occasions? So how optimistic are you as to the success of such a process or move? Thank you.
So I'll answer part of it. I'll let the governor also answer part of that. The issue is this, that we've been asked to do reforms as multilateral development banks, and those reforms are very much needed. From the IMF to the World Bank to all regional multilateral development banks. And there's also been a report of the capital adequacy framework for the multilateral development banks in terms of how much capital we need to be able to do the work that we do, which we agree with a lot of recommendations. But as I said, many of the recommendations that are put together in that capital adequacy report, we've been leading and doing them way before they even suggested them as an organization. So a lot of what we're doing is actually what's now been used to say everybody else should do it. So whether it's on innovating on SDRs, whether it's on synthetic securitization, whether it is on risk transfer of assets from our portfolio, from our asset book to private sector, or whether it is in terms of special temporary callable capital, which we were the first to put that in place as we are doing our general capital increase. So we've been innovating. And so we feel quite pleased that our leadership is recognized in the world with regard to that. But having said that, I want to make 3 comments on the global financial architecture reforms. First, it's important to have global public goods. So you're dealing with issues of global pandemics, issues of climate, and so on geopolitical risks. Yes. However, global events don't operate in the air. They land in a region, they land in a country, they land in a community. Therefore, more than ever before, it's a greater need for the regional multilateral development banks like ourselves to have more capital to be able to address the consequences of those global dynamics in our regions. And that's because regional development banks know their regions well. They work there, they are trusted, they have policy instruments, they have a lot of programs they've been doing. So all I'm trying to say is that the global financial architecture reforms should create a balance. We should not suddenly be thinking the whole world is all about global public goods. It's also, the regions require a lot more resources. When you talk about geopolitical risks and conflicts, in Africa today, we have almost 85% of Africans living in or close by somewhere that has a conflict. And when you don't resolve those conflicts, they have regional spillover effects. They can even have global effects. So my point is regional multilateral development banks require to be better capitalized. In fact, during this meeting, we had the UK governor and other governors that came out and say, we want to have this bank to be a much larger bank. And so I think this is something that is very, very important for us to have. A much larger bank that deals with the challenges of Africa. The second point I want to make here also is with the issue of how we connect with the private sector. The African Development Bank is better placed in attracting resources from the private sector. And finally is when it comes to the issue of leveraging that private sector, the critical issue for us is not just more callable capital. Callable capital is important. We use it. As a bank, we maximize callable capital all across the bank, more than any other multilateral development bank globally. We use it to give us the AAA we have. All of it, we maximize it. But what is important is how much capital is paid in. So, because if I'm going to leverage private sector, it's risky, but it means I need more risk capital to be able to do that. So the point I'm making is that, yes, we are asked to do a lot of these reforms, but there are other things that even others, our shareholders that are asking us to do, will have to do to make it easier for us to be able to do that. I don't know whether, Governor, you want to make a comment on that.
Yeah, I'll just make a brief comment regarding the first question to give you about the GDP and the wealth we have that is understated. Of course, in most African countries, we are aware that we have a wealth of agricultural land and real estate that we are unable to monetize. We are unable to, partially because of the registration of these lands and these are not really solid, and secondly, because more important is the financial markets are not developed enough to do this. This in itself can do a lot of hype, but that's the story about the GDP and what's hidden in it in most of our countries. Regarding the second question, of course, I am not to speak on behalf of AFDB, but I just want you all to realize that they are really walking a thin line and doing something very important. I don't know of any other country, I don't know of countries in Africa that are AAA. I don't know, there is none, okay? So this rating is what allows the AFDB to generate low funding and then give it to countries who are mainly around the single B, double B, triple C, this area. And therefore, they are really walking a thin line. They have been innovating in a lot. I've had the chance to have a discussion with Dr. Orama. They are talking about hybrid instruments, hybrid capital, convertibles, long-term debt, subordinated debt. And more important, also, there is an issue that is not addressed a lot, but I talked to Dr. Rama and he said they will even give it more thought. It's the currency risk for the countries that receive this. Most countries receive these funds in dollars or in euros, puts it in projects. These projects get local currency, and these are long-term projects. In 5-10 years, the currency they are paid 2 and 3 and 4 times what they have taken in the old exchange rate. That's a real crucial issue that not only does a problem, but hinders future financing for projects that need offtake, which are long-term offtake. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Governor Abdallah. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, Mr. President is required elsewhere for other commitments, and I think you'll appreciate it if we bring this press conference to a close. Mr. President, do you have any final words?
No, if the questions are straight to the point, I'll take 3 short questions and then we'll close.
All right.
Only 3.
Only 3. Okay, so we'll take this gentleman here and then we'll
But it has to be gender balance.
Yes, and then we'll dash to the back to the lady, and then
Okay.
this one here. Go for it.
Merci beaucoup. Moi, je...
Thank you very much. May I proceed? My name is Yves Laurent Goma from Gabon. I work with GabonActu.com. So I'd like to focus specifically on carbon credits. My country recently hosted a summit, the One Forest Summit actually, and the country's interest was to set and value the carbon credit and to price it. Unfortunately, after that summit, we still have no clear idea yet. We know the cost of a Volkswagen car, we know the cost of a cup of coffee, but with the progress of science, we are still not able to measure carbon credits. And you said this, the African Development Bank is the key to the success of Africa. Can you help our countries to spearhead, to take the lead, so that in future we are able to measure and price those credits? Thank you.
Yeah, the lady at the back.
Hello, I'm from Tunisian Press Agency. I want to ask especially about Tunisia. How can you evaluate the economic growth and the special and the urgent measures to take, knowing that the discussions with the Monetary Fund are stopped? Thank you.
And the last one, Maureen, please. Yeah, microphone there. No, there's a microphone here, please. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Maureen Chibo. I publish Real News Magazine online based in Lagos, Nigeria. I congratulate you for hosting this meeting and also for the launch of the Pharmaceutical Foundation. And that's where my question is going to be focused on. And I would like you and the governor to answer this question. We are preparing for the pandemic, as you said, but we have one already in the country or in the region that claims more lives. COVID-19 claimed about 257 lives in 2022, but we have malaria that claimed 600,000, more than 600,000 lives in 2021. And children under 5 years are about 77%, and 95% of malaria globally occurs in Africa. What is this foundation going to do to fast forward vaccine that has been developed so that the workforce in Africa that is being debilitated by this malaria pandemic to be curbed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll be very brief. I think the first one, I went to great length already in explaining how carbon will be done. So if you just go back to what I said, I spent a lot of time on that, which is we will support countries to be able to properly, in fact, I use your country as an example, Gabon, in terms of that, being able to measure the price of carbon, price carbon properly. So three things: price carbon properly, standardizing all across, developing a market for carbon within Africa itself that will ensure that people are actually making those investments. So literally almost like a carbon exchange market. And so we have to just do things ourselves. Don't wait for others to do it for you. The second one, and by the way, I met with the Minister of Finance in Gabon and with President Ali Bongo in Gabon. And I explained to His Excellency the need to re-estimate the GDP of Gabon based on the valuation of the environmental services that Gabon provides to the world. And that will require engaging with the IMF and others on the methodologies for being able to do that. But it's something that we must do. It's something that we must do, because if Gabon environmental services are well taken care of, it means that its GDP, weighted by those things, will be much bigger than it is today. And then when you talk about debt, the debt to GDP ratio will be much lower, so which means they can have a lot more resources or qualify for a lot more concessional resources that they can use to even do more greener investments. So that's on that. The second one is on Tunisia. I had meetings with the Minister of Finance of Tunisia. We are supporting Tunisia in various ways, from agriculture to infrastructure and so on, and also supporting them on energy as well, solar energy, digital agricultural systems, and providing policy-based support also to Tunisia. But they are, as you rightly said, in discussions with the IMF, and when I asked where that status is, they said they will soon be able to complete it. So as soon as they complete that process with the IMF, which I strongly encourage, that will make it a lot easier for us to consider other instruments in support of the country. Chibo, on your point on the pharmaceuticals, yes, you know, that's the problem when you depend on others. When you depend on others, they can only give you what they have. It may not be what you need. The epidemiological profile of Africa is so different. You have cholera, you have malaria, you have measles, you have, sometimes we have problems with Ebola, we have chicken pox, and you have all these things. And so you don't expect pharmaceutical companies globally to work on things in which is specific for your region. And that's why we need to make sure that we build our own research and development capacity to manufacture drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, and vaccines that are linked to our own disease profile. Secondly, is that the reaction to different drugs varies based on genetic makeup. And so a lot of clinical trials that are done are not done in Africa in mind before those drugs are actually released. But if you manufacture your own pharmaceutical drugs, you can run the clinical trials in Africa based on your own genetic makeup. So the kind of recommendations that you'll be having will be very, very different. And this is why the Africa Pharmaceutical Technology Foundation is very critical. It will access proprietary global technology to do how to do vaccines. But it's not just getting the vaccine, it's the knowledge, the know-how of how to do that, being able then to adapt that to fit with the disease profile that Africa has, so which is the ability to adapt technologies and do it to meet your own needs. But you can't get something from nothing. Africa has to significantly increase investment in research and development, biomedical sciences, pharmaceutical research. And this is some of the things that this foundation will actually allow Africa to be able to do and connect the local and the regional research and development in biomedical research to global, but focusing on the needs of of Africa. I wish you were in the session. I don't know why you were there on the first day, on Monday, where we have Professor Happy, who is from Cameroon, but is a distinguished professor that is dealing with genomics issue. It's amazing how he was able to explain to us that even the variants that people found, the beta variants, the variants that they found of COVID, no, yeah, some of those variants, I don't know exactly the name, but the ones that was found in South Africa, the beta variant or one of those things, was actually sequenced by them. So a lot of work is being done in Africa, but we cannot be spending 2% of GDP on R&D and expect to be a world-class continent. We have to significantly increase work on that. But that's what the foundation, among the many things that it will do.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just before you go, Mr. President, there's a clarification from a journalist here about the value of the Egypt's nexus for water, food, and energy, whether you heard it was $1.4 billion or is it more? Yes, it's more. It's 14.7 billion.
No. It's the total.
Yeah.
What Egypt was trying. Let me let Egypt explain. Yeah, it's the total what Egypt was trying to do is more than nexus on water, food, and energy. Egypt was trying to raise a total of $14 billion. Who asked the question? Where's the person who asked the question? Who asked the question?
This clarification came from...
Maybe the person who asked the question is not even here, so there's no point.
Maybe they have left here. Yeah.
Okay, if the person is not here, then there's no point answering the question. But just
have they left?
Hold on, but just for clarity, Egypt during COP27 tried to mobilize $14 billion to deal with issues of climate change more generally. The nexus on food, water, food, and energy is just one component of all of that. And that component, Egypt asked to raise $1.42 billion, where we were asked to be the lead to raise that money. But we're happy to do that, but we've been able to exceed that, mobilize $2.2 billion towards that for Egypt. And we've also committed that we will now also contribute to the energy pillar and also there's another pillar, food pillar, with others. So I hope that clarifies for those that are here, even though if the person who asked the question is not here.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen of the press, you've got the power of the pen, the mic, the lens, and the keyboard to accurately and boldly and powerfully tell the story of Africa. You've heard it all. Thank you so much. Mr. President and Governor, thank you so much. You've heard enough questions. No more questions, my friend.